Welcome back, it's Seth here. If you're keeping over this amount of cash, I would say you're making a very big mistake. I have so many friends and family that have this amount of cash, and I know they feel safe because they can rely on this cash when things get rough. However, they don't realize keeping this amount of cash is actually derailing them from achieving their financial goals. And in general, keeping a large amount of cash is not a great idea. And what we find is that a large portion of the population, 82% of Americans, do not even use a high interest savings account. The majority of Americans, up to 57%, keep their savings in a regular or traditional savings account. In this video, I'll be talking about why keeping over this amount of cash is not a great idea, and how you can use this excess cash to achieve your financial goals. But before I dive deeper into the video, please hit the like button down below, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to help grow our channel. Now that you hit the like button, let's dive in. So to start off, the first reason why you shouldn't have a large cash balance in your bank account is because you end up spending more. So let's say you have $50,000 in your bank account and you go spend $3,000. Now you still have $47,000. And you may think that you could still spend more and be completely fine. The thing is, when you have a large cash balance, you're probably okay with spending more money than you should on things that you don't really need. And by seeing this large cash balance, you're probably going out and buying designer clothing, bags, and shoes when you already have enough and you really don't need any more. And a perspective from a certified financial planner, Scott Cole, who is an Alabama-based CFP at Cole Financial Planning and Wealth Management, suggests that checking accounts are essentially used for money that comes in and then quickly goes out. Also, Scott warns that keeping a large amount of money in your checking account expands your expenses. And for some people, so much that they eat all their income. This is all too common when individuals put a large amount of money into their regular bank account, and they take this for granted. The thing is that you could have saved $40,000 of that $50,000 as an emergency reserve. But because you see this large balance, it gives you an illusion that you have way more money than you actually need. Thus, you even start dipping into your emergency fund without you even realizing it. I highly recommend that you automate your paycheck once you receive it. So you have a certain amount of money that goes to your checking account, your savings account, your investments, and any short-term goals, so that you can potentially avoid this whole issue. Now, moving on to the second reason why having a large cash balance is not a great idea, is that cash does not work for you. This is a common mistake that a lot of individuals make when they start off in their careers and they start moving up. All the money that they make, they start storing that in their regular bank accounts. However, a lot of these individuals don't realize that the money that's just sitting in their bank account isn't working for them at all. And the ones that do realize that they should probably invest don't end up investing. Your ordinary checking account might only give you 0.01% interest on all the money that you've been storing in that account. And truly, that is absolutely nothing. However, let's say you invested that $50,000 in the S&P 500 5 years ago, so in 2020. In October of 2020, the S&P 500 was sitting at $3,456. And now, if you fast forward to October of 2025, the S&P 500 is sitting at $6,664. That is a 93% increase from 2020, meaning that your $50,000 will now be worth $96,500. I personally also like tech, so I also do follow the NASDAQ 100. And if you look at NASDAQ 100 in October of 2020, the NASDAQ 100 was trading at $11,548. And now, if you look at NASDAQ 100 in October of 2025, the NASDAQ 100 is trading at $22,679. So this is a 96% return, which means your $50,000 now turns into $98,000. So it's important to remember that there's a huge opportunity cost for not investing, as there's a huge downside of not having the money work for you. Each dollar that you put to work today will make you a lot more money in the future. Now, moving on to the third reason why having a large cash balance is not a great idea, it's that cash loses value to inflation. If you look at the supply of money that's been printed from the chart, which is the M1 supply, which consists of liquid assets such as cash and deposits made into checking accounts, you can see that over time, the cash supply has been increasing, and especially since 2020. Additional supply means that there's more money to go around, and this will result in a lot of inflation. So in simple terms, the dollar that you had last year will not go as far this year because the cost of goods and services have gone up. And overall, the goal of the Federal Reserve always has been to keep inflation from 2 to 3% per year. And if we look from the 2000s, the inflation has averaged around 2.56% per year. So to give you some context, let's say you had $50,000 that was sitting in your bank account in 2014. And using the inflation rate of 2.5% in 10 years, so in 2024, that $50,000 would only be worth $39,060. And the reason why I went from 2014 to 2024 is so that I could give you some perspective. In 2014, you could walk into McDonald's and get medium fries for $1.59, a Oreo McFlurry for $2.39, and a Big Mac for $3.99, which brings the total cost of your meal to $7.97. Whereas in 2024, the same medium fries would cost you $3.79, the Oreo McFlurry would cost you $4.49, and the Big Mac would be $5.99, which would bring the total cost to $14.27. So when you compare these prices from 2014 to 2024, there was a 79% increase in the cost of food if you were to go to McDonald's and buy the same meal. So in 2014, that $50,000 that you had sitting in your bank account could get you 6,273 meals. However, in 2024, that same 50,000, which is now worth $39,060, would only get you 2,737 meals, which means you would be buying 3,536 less meals in 2024 compared to 2014. I mean, at the end of the day, your health will thank you because you're not eating as much McDonald's, and Brian Johnson may actually gain some respect for you. But the truth is that we should not be losing this much money to just inflation. So there are many different ways that you can store your large cash balance so that you don't lose a lot of it to inflation. So some of the ways you can store your large cash balance is through real estate, buying commodities, buying collectibles and bonds. These are all great options, but there's also one more that I would recommend that I personally use, and that is to get a high interest saving account. There are a lot of banks out there that offer a decent interest rate on the money that you stored in your savings account. And I personally use a high interest savings account from Wealthsimple. They provide an interest from anywhere from 1.5% all the way up to 2.5%, depending on how much money you're storing with Wealthsimple. So overall, what the important part is that you are being smart with how you're storing your money so that you're not losing a lot of it to inflation. Now, moving on to the fourth reason why having a large cash balance in your bank account is not a great idea, and that is that there's no insurance over the CDIC or FDIC amount. So not a lot of people are aware of this, but banks only have a limited amount of insurance that protects your money if the bank were to go bankrupt tomorrow. And this amount for Canadian banks is $100,000, and for American banks, it's $250,000. I do understand that a bank going bankrupt is fairly rare and most likely will not happen. However, we have seen banks go bankrupt in the past few decades. If you live in Canada, luckily, we haven't seen many banks go bankrupt at all. However, in the US, it's a whole different story. During the 2008 financial crisis, Washington Mutual went bankrupt with over $307 billion in assets. And we also saw IndyMac Bank go bankrupt with over $32 billion in assets. And just in 2023, three banks went bankrupt. First one being Silicon Valley Bank, then the Signature Bank, and then the First Republican Bank. Even though the chances are low, it's still possible. So if you're holding a large amount of cash for whatever reason that may be, I recommend that you spread that cash across multiple banks. So let's say you have $300,000, I'd put $100,000 into three different banks. So now that you're insured by three different banks, if they were to go bankrupt tomorrow, you would get that money back. However, in general, if you have a large amount of money that you are not using towards anything like a short-term goal, I would go and invest that money and not let that sit in your bank account. Now, this leads me to what is the right amount of cash to keep in your bank account? So in my opinion, this cash amount consists of your emergency fund plus any short-term goals. If you're not aware of the emergency fund concept, this is where you store 6 to 9 months of your monthly expenses in case you lose your job and you can pay majority of your bills. So for an example, let's say your monthly rent is $2,000. The utilities for the month are $300. You have car expense, which is $500 a month. Your grocery expenses are $400 a month, and any other expenses are $300 a month. This means that your monthly expenses are $3,500. So this means that I would save about $21,000 in case I were to lose my job tomorrow. I can make payments for the next 6 months without worrying. And your short-term goal is anything that you want to purchase within the next 5 years. So for me personally, earlier this year, I purchased a new car. And for that, I saved up $30,000. So in theory, if my emergency fund was $21,000 and I saved up $30,000 to purchase a new vehicle, this means that the total amount of cash that I should be holding in my bank account is $51,000. And any amount that goes over $51,000, I will personally go and invest that money. Also, I personally recommend that you have separate accounts for your emergency fund and your short-term goals so that you don't get them mixed up and taking out more money than you actually need to. So that was all for this video. I hope you guys understand how much money you should be keeping in your bank account and how you should deploy the rest of the money to help you grow and become wealthier. If you guys enjoyed this video, please stay tuned for future videos. And until next time, remember to keep investing.